Hello, welcome back. So it's been a little while since I've made a reading update, so I thought today I would sit down and just talk about some of the fiction I've been reading recently. I haven't been reading any difficult fiction recently, mostly it's all just been for entertainment, and I've been perfectly fine with that. I don't know what it is, but lately I have just really wanted to read entertaining books, action-packed books, things that I can just kind of relax into and not have to think about too much. I've been reading quite a bit of nonfiction also, but I'm trying to kind of separate things out and make it a little bit easier for me in making videos. And so anyway, I'm just going to get into this. So the first book is The Trickster by Muriel Gray. And so this is set in Canada. It's set in a ski resort town called Silver. I can't remember which province it's in exactly, but it centers around a man named Sam Hunt, and he is a native Canadian, but he has cut all ties with his tribe. He grew up on a reservation, and some things happened when he was very young, and he cut off all contact with his people, with his family, like I said, with his tribe, and he went out into Canada and he knocked around for quite some time. And one of the jobs that Sam took eventually was driving a bus in Silver, driving tourists from one spot to another. And he met a woman. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Like I said, it's been about a month since I read this. And they fell in love. And her parents own a house in Silver, and they move in. And so it's about 8 years after that. And so one of the legends that Sam grew up with, which supposedly his grandfather had dealt with in person, was that of the Trickster, which is sort of like hate and evil personified. And this creature comes back every now and then, and a shaman has to deal with this creature. And the creature can take on different well, he can appear as an animal or as a person or something like that. And the shaman is supposed to know him by sight instantly. And so that is what happens. And Sam is at work one day and he looks over. There's this whole backstory going on about how this guy comes out of the mountain and he gets a job. He gets a job at this ski resort. There's a lot going on here. There's quite a lot going on in this book, and I think actually there's too much going on in this book as far as like side stories are concerned, because there's a whole backstory going on with this ski resort, which really is unnecessary to the plot itself, and added about 100 pages or so to the book, and I just didn't feel like that was necessary. But anyway, Sam sees the Trickster. He knows him immediately, but he's still fighting against his past, against his background, and he doesn't want anything to do with it, but he knows immediately that this is evil personified. And so at the same time, a long way off, there is a man from Sam's past who was the assistant of Sam's grandfather. So Sam's grandfather was named Eden, and he was a shaman. And I cannot remember this man's name, but he worked with Eden, and he becomes aware that the Trickster is out too. I think something speaks to him in a dream, and he gets the feeling that he has to walk all the way to where Sam is. So he does. He walks several hundred miles. And at the same time, we are given the background story of the last time that the Trickster came out. And so there were quite a few, well, some of them were British, some of them were Scottish, but they were there and they were digging this tunnel into the mountain. It was a train tunnel. And the tribe that lived about there would not let them dig this tunnel through. This is about 100 years before, so this would have been in the late 1800s or the very early 1900s. And that is the story of how the Trickster was released in early 1900s. It was the early 1900s, and how Sam's grandfather and a minister dealt with the Trickster then. So we have this unwinding story of what happened in the past, along with what happened in the present. And I want to say that Sam's wife's name was Maggie. I don't know if that's genuine, but so anyway, we go along with Sam as he is waking back up to his past and coming to terms with this fact, and the Trickster is doing awful things around town, killing people in terrible ways. So Sam's son has the gift also, and the trickster starts to like mess with him quite a lot in dreams and things like that, and he becomes really withdrawn, and he starts to act like the kid in, was it The Ring? You remember the movie from like 20 years ago? Was it The Grudge 2 or The Ring or The Ring 2? I don't remember, but the kid, he's all like pale and he's drawing the scary pictures and stuff. Uh, he starts to act like that. And so, because of the racist stereotypes that the white Canadians have against the native Canadians, the teacher, Sam's son's teacher, becomes convinced that Sam is doing some very bad things to him on the basis of one drawing, which it's just like a charcoal drawing, right? And so then she calls Sam's wife, and the wife shows up, and she immediately begins to doubt Sam, and Sam is acting pretty weird because he's like having these fainting fits. I don't know. There was a lot going on in this book. I think it could have been trimmed down quite a bit. And the last little bit, like the big finale, like I didn't quite understand what was going on or how that all happened. I don't guess I want to give too much away, but I didn't understand what was going on for the last 50 pages or so. I did think that it was well written. I enjoyed it, but I did think that it was too long and there were too many different plots going on all at once that weren't really necessary, that didn't need to take up so much space. So the book I read after that, it was quite a while after that, I think. So in my last video, I'm pretty sure that I talked about some of the novels that I read in between the Trickster and this book, because it seems to me in my memory that there's like a 3-week gap between the two, or maybe even more. But it is a reread for me. It is Resident Evil Caliban Cove by S.D. Perry. It's all shiny. Anyway, so this is the first Resident Evil novel that was not based on a comic or a video game. So this was written by S.D. Perry. I probably already said that, but she is the daughter of the science fiction novelist Steve Perry, and she's one of my favorite writers. Now, her books are not like great literature or anything like that, but they are fun, they are entertaining, and I've yet to pick one up and not be entertained. And so I pretty much see her name on a book and I just buy it because I know it's going to be entertaining. And so this takes place after the events of the first Resident Evil game. So I never actually got to play the first Resident Evil game. I think I played an arcade version, like the big arcade version with the guns and all of that. The kind you have to put dimes in, and then like you get killed and you have to put more dimes in, and then you run out of dimes, so you have no idea what happens after that. It's really frustrating. So I don't really know actually what happened in the first Resident Evil except what I have read about it. And so this takes place after that. And so the members of STARS, which STARS is the Special Tactics and Rescue Squad. I can never seem to remember that. But they have been blamed for what happened in Raccoon City because Umbrella is, paying for all this propaganda, all these lies to be put out in the media. And so Barry, the leader of the STARS team, has convened this group at his home, and one of them is Rebecca Chambers. She is about 18. She's a genius. She's a college graduate with like several degrees, I think in chemistry and like medicine. So she's a serious individual, but she's not very well versed in like combat or anything like that, like some of the others. And Barry has brought a man from another STARS team in New England to his house, and he explains to them that basically Umbrella has paid off all the leaders of STARS, and he has also become aware of something going on in New England. And of course, it's like your classic video game setup. So there is a lighthouse in Caliban Cove, and fishermen have been disappearing from around there, and some of the locals have been disappearing, but they're also talking about these weird creatures that come out at night. And so the STARS team, even though they are now outlaws basically, and they are on the run and in hiding, Rebecca Chambers and a couple of the others decide to go to this Caliban Cove and see what's going on and try to gather evidence and maybe stop whatever is going on. And they do. They go up there, and it is run by this guy who was a genetic scientist, and he has gone completely insane, of course, and he has killed all the other scientists he's working with, and he has this formula that resuscitates their corpses, and they are the walking dead, and they all know how to use guns, and they follow his orders. Like, no matter what he says, they will just do it. And this is the story of them going in there, and they get stuck, of course. They get trapped, and there are corpses everywhere, and they're fighting these creatures, and one of them gets infected, and they're trying to search for a cure, and they get betrayed. And it's your basic Resident Evil game. It was enjoyable. This is, like I said, the second time I read it. I enjoyed it as much this time as I did the first time I read it. And so the next book is Sarah Pinborough's Feeding Ground. And leisure fiction did on this book what it did on other books, which is really, really annoying, in that they had a tendency to put out sequels to books they had already published without putting anywhere on the cover, or on the back cover, or on the inside, that it is a sequel to another book. And that was really okay in this, except a major part of the plot, I guess, to understand where it came from, you had to have read the first book. Even though, from what I understand, the characters in this book are completely different from the characters in the other book. But the plot point I'm talking about is that all the women in London, in Britain, apparently in the world, have been infected with some kind of parasite which is growing inside them. And so they have all become very, very bloated, very large. And they are not acting like themselves at all. And none of the men in this world are affected at all. And so we have different groups of characters. We have like some gangsters from London, and one of them is in prison at the beginning of this, and something really weird starts to happen. Like, the guards don't show up anymore, and eventually his friends come in and get him out. And he lives in these large, like, tower block apartment buildings, and he is the king of this neighborhood. And there are some kids in this building who are there, and one of them has ratted on him, and that's the reason he was in prison. And then we're also dealing with some kids across town who have come into London from a school in the country, like an elite boarding school. So they're all upper class kids. And in the middle of all this, what happens is that all the women start to give birth. And they all give birth to spiders, like spider creatures that are quite large. Like, the smallest are the size of like a medium-sized dog, and they get bigger, and they start to just eat everybody they find. And so we have this story of all these spiders killing people, and people, the kids are holed up, the gangsters are holed up. And so also Blaine was a pimp, and all of his ladies are in this apartment. They stuck them all in this apartment. They were all infected, and they all turned into these spider creatures, right? And they are also all hooked on crack. And so Blaine, he's very, very smart. He's very cunning. He figures this out, and he starts to keep them supplied with crack. Like, there's like a hole in the door, and he will blow the crack through the hole in the door, like the smoke, and this will pacify the spiders, and he turns them into his own little spider army. And he goes hunting for the kid who ratted him out for this murder that he did. And at the same time, they're building like this little empire in London, and his second in command is watching Blaine as he snorts more and more cocaine, and he has this spider army, and they've been friends since they were little kids, but he just can't take it anymore. So he escapes with the kids he finds in this building, and then it's them running away from Blaine and the spider army. And it was good. I mean, it wasn't great. I read that this one is not as good as the first book, but I enjoyed it. Like I came in to the story late, so I wasn't affected by the first book at all. So I just read this one and I just enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. It's pretty gross, pretty creepy. If you're, afraid of spiders, this is absolutely not the book for you. But it is also like a zombie novel where all the zombies are just giant spiders. And I'm certain that Sarah Pinborough was trying to make a statement about, the women and the spiders and everything like that. I don't exactly know what that statement was because symbolism tends to go right over my head. And anyway, it was okay. I enjoyed it anyway. It was entertaining, like I said. Oh, okay. And so the book I read after that is probably not going to take me very long to explain. This is Able Team number 22, the World War III game by Dick Stivers, actually by Tom Arnett. Yes, Tom Arnett. So this is pretty standard, like all these Able teams fit basically a standard formulaic plot where Able team becomes aware of something going on in the country or they're called in for something. They're like a secret group of commandos who they are outside the bounds of all the other government organizations and they do what needs doing. And in this one, there is a Puerto Rican separatist group, and the KGB is feeding them information that there is a missile silo in North Carolina that has it is like a Minuteman missile, but it has a low yield nuclear bomb, but in that bomb is also some kind of bacteria, like a flu bacteria, but on its own, it's not a big deal. It's just a flu. But when it filters through the radiation of the bomb, it becomes deadly. Like it will just spread all over the place, which is kind of absurd if you think about it, because if you have a nuclear bomb, it's going to put out temperatures so hot that anything close to it like that would be disintegrated immediately, and so the plot doesn't really make a lot of sense, and why the flu would be irradiated, I don't know. It didn't make any sense really, but it's an Able Team novel. It doesn't have to make sense. The whole point is that the Puerto Rican separatist group comes in and takes over this bunker in this mountain, which is located in a small like state park, and so there are tourists everywhere. And at the same time, the KGB agent that is running this Puerto Rican group, because he's lying to them to get them to do this, and the second in command of this group, the Puerto Rican group, is also involved in betraying his leader. Like his leader is an idealist and just wants Puerto Rico to be a separate a separate country all on its own, but he wants power, and so he has linked up with the KGB. But anyway, the KGB agent has also been supplying these teenage hackers, computer hackers. So keep in mind, this is 1986, and they are all like very stereotypical 80s nerd teenage hackers, although some of them have been trained with machine guns and stuff, like with their parents are in like the military. It's a really weird book. But the KGB guy, he has set them up with all these computers, and then he says, I know this other guy who has all this hardware, or yeah, and we have to take all your computers, put them on this bus and go across town. We can fit the parts to them there, and then he can know what we take. And it's a really flimsy premise, but they're, like the youngest one is like 13, the oldest is 17. So they load up all their giant 1980s computers on this bus, and he takes them to this camp. And the whole idea is that they have to hack into the computer of this bunker and control the missile. And so there's also a KGB team of scientists that goes in with the Puerto Rican group into the bunker. An Able team has to go in, and the way they get into this bunker is that they crawl through hundreds of meters of sewage pipe and then blast their way in, and there's a big gunfight and everything. And I feel like I can tell you this because it's an Able Team novel, and Able Team always saves the day. They save the day. So I mean, these are just fun. They're just action packed. They're like a like an 80s TV series with more blood and guts, and it's very they're always at odds with like the guy who runs the CIA and stuff like that. So the last book I'm going to talk about today, this is the one that I finished. I finished this last night. It is Category 5 by Philip S. Donlay. I'm guessing it's Donlay. And this was okay. This is an action novel through and through. It's, from what I understand, is Donlay's first novel, and so it very much feels like a first novel. There is some not so good dialogue, and it feels like it was rushed, like it was written very quickly, and I feel like maybe he could have sat on it longer and worked some things out better, but it has a wild plot. So there's a guy named, what is his name? Donovan Nash. His name is Donovan Nash, and I'm probably going to give some big spoilers for this book. So his name is Donovan Nash. He runs a team called EcoWatch, and he has these Gulfstream 4 jets, which are packed with scientific instruments, and they fly around by hurricanes and storms and things like that and collect information. And he had a girlfriend named Lauren. She works with this weather organization. She has this idea. It's very much like Twister. If you ever saw Twister, where like they release they have the little thing full of the or whatever they were, and they flew up into the tornado and collected data. It's kind of like that, except it's a balloon, and they're going to float it up into this giant hurricane. And so in the very beginning, she is in Bermuda, and the hurricane is like barreling down on Bermuda. And who should show up but Donovan Nash? And he, on the way to the airport, the car she's in flips over and she almost drowns. And when he learns she's in the car and she's late, he hops in his car and drives, and he finds her on the side of the road and she's pretty much underwater, and he saves her. And then they, oh no, I haven't seen you in a year. And like, well, yeah, well, you left me. And we learn that she left him because she made an assumption that he got a phone call from a lady who called herself Elizabeth, or said Elizabeth is here. And what it was is that it was the man who raised him, it was his daughter calling him to tell him that his mother's ashes had made it back to the United States, because when he was young, his name was Robert Huntington, and he is the secret billionaire heir to the Huntington Oil Company's money. And he was involved in some stuff in the 80s. He met a woman, and she was like really big in the environmentalism protest movements, and some bad stuff happened to her, and he faked his own death and became Donovan Nash. And he has been living for almost 20 years under this false identity, and he sees everything that he has built because he really just wants to be a regular guy. What happened was that his parents took him out on this yacht, or this, I don't know if it was a yacht, but it's like a sailboat, and they went into a storm in the ocean, and the boat sank, and his parents died, and he's traumatized for life because he couldn't save his mother. And like, he wasn't brave enough to go save her. He was 14. And so he doesn't want anybody to know who he is. He couldn't even tell the woman he loved who he was. And at the same time, she has been hiding from him for a year that he has a daughter. And their daughter just happens to be in New York City. And this super hurricane is barreling down on New York City. And they can't get out because the hurricane has disrupted all these flights and stuff. And so at the same time, there is a spy. And Donovan is, like, the U.S. government thinks that Donovan is a spy because 2 years before, he was flying his EcoWatch jet in, like, the area around where Alaska and Russia come very close together. And they got an emergency message that there was a Russian submarine that was on fire, and it sank, and they dropped a lifeboat and like ran out of fuel, and they had to land in Russia. And so the government thinks maybe he's a spy because he landed this jet full of all this scientific equipment in Russia. And so the whole main plot of this book hinges on the fact that Donovan gets arrested for being a spy. And there's also a news reporter who is trying to, I'm telling you all this because it's a really fun story. Like, it's so over the top that it's just enjoyable. There's a reporter that's trying to out him as being Robert Huntington, the billionaire heir. And when Lauren was in college, she wrote this paper about how you could perhaps set off a nuclear bomb in the middle of a hurricane and disperse it, like stop it in its tracks. And she did it just as a joke because she was really irritated by some theory that this other person had. And so they are going to set off a 115 megaton hydrogen bomb in this hurricane, this giant mega hurricane. Like, it's the biggest hurricane that's ever happened ever. And Lauren is afraid because maybe it might disperse the hurricane, but there's also a chance that it will just turn it into an even bigger hurricane. And so one of the EcoWatch jets flies them near this hurricane, and I'll just tell you, on board there is an investigator. They don't know he's an investigator, but he catches the other guy, one of the other scientists, putting in some false information into his computer, and they get in a fight, and he shoots his gun, and it shoots through the wall of the plane into the engine and bursts the engine, and like all these shards of metal fly out into the tail. And so they can't control the plane, and they fly through the wall of the hurricane into the eye. And so now they have like 5 hours before the government sets off this giant bomb, and Donovan is getting grilled by the government in this place. And so the guy who raised him is very, very well connected, and he makes a bunch of phone calls, and the president calls and gets Donovan released because the guy tells him, by the way, this is Robert Huntington, the heir to the billions of dollars of the Huntington Oil Corporation. And somehow that absolves him from all, I don't know. They let him go, and he goes off to save these people in the eye of this hurricane. It was so over the top. It was so nuts. Like, it was completely absurd, but it was very good. Like, it was very good in the sense that the pace is relentless, and like the characters are not done so well. The story is not done so well, and this one thing, it's one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and not the best way. So I feel like probably another 6 months of working on it, letting this book sit and then working on it, it could have been really well streamlined. As it is, it's just a pretty good thriller as far as, like I said, as far as the action goes. But the story, the characters, they're not the best, but it is relentless in its action. And the flying scenes are done really well. I enjoyed that. And yeah, it was just enjoyable. So that is what I have been reading recently. And I really enjoyed most of these books. I mean, some of them were kind of absurd, but I enjoyed them. And so I just want to thank you for joining me today. This video is much longer than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be quite short, but I just cannot seem to make a short video no matter what I do. But thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.